Hey, John Smith again with ExtraHop Networks. Today I want to talk a little bit about a LinkedIn post I posted on Friday called protocol threading. It can sound a little bit confusing, but it's basically when we try to do some surveillance on an attack that involves more than one protocol, right? And it's something really difficult, if not impossible to do with most logging solutions, and certainly very difficult, if not impossible to do with most endpoint or EDR solutions. So, with two of the three devices in the cybersecurity triad, SIEM and EDR, not really that good at this. Let's turn to NDR and specifically RevealX and how we can do it uniquely. As I understand it, we are the only vendor that's capable of doing this today. So, protocol threading is kind of when we put a piece of context in memory to reuse later. And we want to do that today with something called AS-rep roasting. And basically that's where you harvest hashes for those systems that have pre-authentication disabled in Active Directory. I'll give you an idea. It involves two protocols. It involves LDAP and Kerberos. And what it does, what an ASP-rep roast attack does, is the first step is to query Active Directory for those systems with this 4194304 attribute, and that's basically looking for accounts that have pre-auth exemption, specifically Kerberos pre-auth exemption. If you see that type of a query, that can be an indicator that someone is doing recon to find systems with that type of attribute. In fact, I'm doing quite a bit of trigger writing around this user account control because there's a lot of recon that involves that, and almost none of this is logged in Active Directory or in Windows event logs. In fact, Kerberos and LDAP do some minimal event viewer logs. Grabbing them off the wire is really the best way to do that. So I'm going to issue today an ASP rep roast attack. So let's come to my box here. I'm on a Windows system now that I've downloaded Rubeus on. So I'm going to clear my screen. So I'm going to go ahead and execute a Rubeus attack real quick. So first step here, let's have a look at the trigger. So this is the trigger itself. And again, it involves both of the protocols, Kerberos and LDAP, a Kerberos response and an LDAP request. So on LDAP request, you can see there are a few things that I'm looking for specific to pre-auth exemption. Here you'll see the exact same attribute, right? 4194304. We're also looking if they're looking for account types, so these are user account types. So basically, if they do a query for pre-authentication exemption, we're going to do two things. One, we are going to fire a detection on that. But in addition to that, we're going to park this into what's called our session table. And that's going to place this into a memory location. And then if I see an ASP rep roast attack or any sort of ASP rep, right, I'm going to query that session table and say, hey, did this AS underscore rep come from a device that was querying LDAP for pre-auth exemption? Hopefully that makes sense, right? So we see reconnaissance occurring. We put that IP in memory. Then if we later see more malicious behavior from that IP, like something like an AS rep, then we're going to also flag that, and that gives you an even higher fidelity alert, right? And some high context rich, high fidelity alerts that then can be sent to your SIEM or your telemetry. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to perform the attack here. So what Rubeus is going to do is it's going to first query Active Directory for pre-authentication exemption. And then if you look here, you'll see three accounts appear to have been compromised. We have an SPN, a service account that's been compromised. Here we see EsriDax has been compromised, or at least they've been able to grab a hash. And then, of course, we see a user BB-8 has also successfully been queried for pre-auth exemption, and this is the hash associated with it. So from there, they can start the process of trying to interrogate those hashes and pull the passwords out. Likewise, in our debug window, we see the initial LDAP request, right? So we see the potential reconnaissance happen, and then we also see the three different accounts that have been compromised, right? We see the BB8, the ExtraDAX account, and of course we see the SPN, the SQL Service account. So then let's take a look and see if we have any detections. So in the last 5 minutes here, we may have to refresh this again, but let's see if this comes up. And what we should get, and there we see we have 4 detections. We see the Active Directory pre-auth query, right? And again, this is from the host that was sending it. So we have the offender and the victim, in this case, our domain controller. But we also see the 3 AS rep roast victims here. And I'm sorry if I keep saying ASP rep roast. I've been in the industry too long, I guess. So anyway, we see the 3 AS rep roast victims. And in this case, we see the SQL Service account. We see the ExtraDAX account. And of course, we see our BB8 account. And if we want to, we can drill in, take a look at this, get an idea of everything that this particular host was doing. We're essentially looking at a dossier, right? One of the big indicators that I look for, here you see all of these different accounts, right? If this isn't a Citrix server, why are there so many client principal names associated with it? We can also see what other detections have happened on here. So we see the LDAP query, we see the AS rep abuse, but then we also see this interesting one. This is another alert where we see the JA3s that are associated with PowerShell have gone out to raw.githubusercontent.com. If we see PowerShell, specifically the JA3s, going out to GitHub, and specifically the raw GitHub user content site, we will flag that, right, as something that you should investigate. It's pretty rare that PowerShell goes out and doesn't invoke web request for something from GitHub unless it's fileless malware or something like that. So again, this is an example of an alert that has 2 protocols, right, or an attack that has multiple protocols. To do this with logs, especially as busy and as noisy as Active Directory is, you would be collecting gigs and gigs of logs, in addition to the fact that honestly, Active Directory just doesn't log LDAP and Kerberos very well. Windows events are very sparse. They're not very agile. Here, anything that you've observed, all of these alerts can be JSON stringified and sent to your existing SIM. So rather than collecting millions of logs, you'll collect a couple of logs to get the same context. But more importantly, you're not parsing and querying through logs. Essentially, we're delivering this, context-rich, high-fidelity alert to either your SIM, your SOAR, like Demisto or Phantom. We're delivering this to you within milliseconds versus, the minutes and in some cases hours it takes to kind of query, the different log files. So it saves you disk, but more importantly, it saves you time. Again, this is John Smith from ExtraHop Networks. This is protocol threading. Thanks for watching.